Welcome. It's Sunday, 6 p.m. Time for Steve's Place. And hopefully this will be the last show I'm doing at this location because I'm hoping to move in the next week, God willing. In the meantime, please bear with us because there may be some unforeseen glitches. I'm on a new computer. I don't think I have everything moved over yet. And so just kind of bear with us. And anyway, I just want to remind people that we do have DVDs from last year available through HowTube. Just go to our website and click on the Tesla figure there, and that should take you right to the video on demands. And we had a brown image, but I couldn't get to it. Still on the old computer there. It's kind of a misery thing trying to get transferred over. Tonight, quite the guest tonight, but let me, before I get to that, I remind everyone to get to the YouTube channel. My numbers are really dropping fast here, so I need you guys to let other people know about us, and when we have great shows, let people know we have great shows, and let them, encourage them to join the Tesla Tube channel, become a subscriber. Subscriber are free. The way you get to it is you just go to teslatech.info and click on the Tesla Tech channel logo there. And we also have a conference directory and speaker directory. I think I'm gonna do a better illustration of that stuff later on. Encourage everyone to become an exclusive member. You can become both a subscriber and a membership. If you get the membership, it's $9.95 or $9.99 a month, and it really helps us out. Keeps us rolling so we can get next year's conference together. Right now, we're still planning to have a conference in Albuquerque. It'll be in probably the second week of August, but we're still looking at a possibility the first week of August, depending on what kind of pricing these people get. And we're really working hard on that. And like I say, this next couple of weeks is going to be kind of hectic because I'm hoping to get better prices out of Albuquerque. I probably won't have a final read on that till middle of December. I'm expecting these people to work on their pricing and everything. And Paul, you're not on full screen. It's tall and thin like a cell phone image. Okay. What's happening is they changed this stuff. It's one of the changes I got to go through here. StreamYard has added a portrait style and a landscape style. So it's broadcasting two different images to YouTube. So if you get the portrait one, go get out of that and go to the next one down, and that should be the landscape one. So that's what's going on there. And like I say, they're throwing everything at me right now, and I'm trying to cope with this. My phone stopped working. I mean, not my phone, my computer started getting this crashing on Friday, and luckily I had another computer laying around that we were still working on, and that's what I'm operating on now. But I still don't have everything migrated over, so it's a handicap thing. And then we also we're looking at hopefully moving here in the next week or two. Anyone who can possibly help, give me a call, and I'll let you know as soon as we close and we can start moving. I want to be out of this place by the end of the month, so we'll see what happens, Anyway, I think I got everything then. So without further ado, let me bring John up and welcome to the show, John. This is John Brandenburg.
Pleasure and honor to be here, Steve.
And John's been on our show in the past and at our conferences. And I first met John back in 1992 at our Mars conference in Carlisle Springs, which got snowed out, but we just turned the set from a conference into a stage set. So we got the best set of Mars info out there. So,
yes,
but without further ado, let me just turn it over to you, John.
Okay. Steve, once again, it's such a great pleasure and honor to be addressing the audience for the Tesla Tech. Everything's a little bit out of kilter, I think, because of the solar storms. Let's say it's the solar storms, but I'm not working exactly with the presentation I thought I had loaded, and I can't get it to change, but that's okay. That's okay. Now, what you're going to see, what I'm going to discuss is work I did for DARPA. I got a $200,000 grant from DARPA to investigate a unified field theory, along the Einstein model of unifying gravity and electromagnetism. And they gave me, I was working in a company and they gave us $200,000 to do research. And what was fun was they said, Dr. Brandenburg, we don't want you to do any experiments, only do theory. You got that? And I said, yes, sir. Please sign my check and I'll get started right away. You can take that. My interpretation of that is the DARPA people wanted to know what I know. So we're discussing subjects that have formerly been classified. And I stumbled on them just because, I was thinking about it, and I'm a theoretical plasma physicist, and that's the theory I drew on to come up with this unified field theory called the GEM theory. And I like to think that maybe this helped people. It has helped people at Site 51, but I think we're exploring territory the government has known about for 30 years. So without further explanation, I'll just say, and like I said, this was not the presentation I thought I was loading, but I can't get the computer to let go of it. So we're just going to proceed. Anyway, the talk I gave as my final report at DARPA was anticipating surprise. In other words, we wanted to figure out if our adversaries, whoever they may be and whatever planet they're from, Earth or someplace else, that we are not going to be surprised by what we see from them. And part of this is to have this GEM, gravity, E&M unification theory and its application to space propulsion. So this is the final report I gave to DARPA. Just quickly, John Brandenburg, I'm introducing myself, anticipating surprise. Then I talk about the unified field theory, which I developed, and its applications. And we can now do gravity modification in the lab. And the White House has confirmed that. I'll explain that at the end of the talk, that this has all been now confirmed through the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy quite recently. Okay, so here I am, John Brandenburg. I've been working on, I'm a trained plasma physicist. I originally started getting work on this on fusion energy, and then I ended up in space propulsion. And and directed energy weapons. So the nice thing about plasmas is everybody knows that they're easy to make in the lab and fun to make. And one of my tasks was to make ball lightning in microwave ovens, which I'd seen done by accident, so I knew it could be done. I saw it done by accident at a Christmas party, and while they were trying to heat popcorn in using gold-rimmed china, and the ball of fire broke loose from the gold rim in the microwave oven and sat there and flew around for like 10 seconds before hitting the wall and disappearing. So then when the Air Force asked me if I could make ball lightning for them, I said, sure. And then we figured out how to do it with God's help. And we published that. And soon everybody was doing it. I want to do this same thing with gravity modification. I want you all to be able to do this in your own laboratories and garages. Now, this is a weak effect that I'll be talking about. You know, don't pack your bags for Mars just yet. I can't make things levitate and float, but we can make gravity temporarily get weak enough that you can see it easily on chemical scales and with load cells. So anyway, here I am. Well, we're trying to avoid, this is, like I said, the wrong presentation, but we're trying to avoid Sputnik moments. I think the government has. And so now, gravity modification from a unified field theory. We know there are four forces in nature, basically. There's the two long-range forces of nature, electromagnetism and gravity. They go as 1 over r squared. They reach all the way across the universe. Then we have the strong force, which holds the nucleus together. It's stronger than the E and M force because you've got a bunch of positive charges being glued together in the nucleus of an atom by this strong force, even though their electrostatic repulsion would make them want to blow apart. Then we have what's called the weak force, which basically holds together the neutron. It keeps an electron and a proton. You can look on the neutron as basically very highly compressed hydrogen. When it breaks down into neutrino. That's the carrier of the weak, associated with the weak force, let's say. And then it releases all neutrons after about 10 minutes turn into hydrogen and some neutrinos. So we have the strong force, the weak force. They are very short range, they call them atomic nuclear glue. And then you have the two long range forces. Now, Einstein felt that he could unify the two long range forces of nature because they both went as 1 over r squared. He just developed his theory of general relativity, and he wanted to incorporate electromagnetism in there. And one of his goals was to be able to change gravity fields with electromagnetism. So he worked on this starting in Germany in about the 1920s and worked on it the rest of his life. So Einstein was working on this theory, and as it turns out, he was right. Like, he was right about a lot of things. But the details were hard to do. As it turns out, the people who worked out the math of this theory was a pair of guys named Kaluza and Klein, and they invoked a hidden fifth dimension. So they had to kind of come up with a little bit of the weak or the strong force to include with electromagnetism and gravity to get them to unify. Isn't that interesting? So anyway, Einstein worked on this, and the unifying concept is the Planck length. There's the Planck mass and the Planck, what's called the Planck charge, which is the square root of the Planck's constant times c, that quantity. So anyway, you work with these Planck length quantities. You basically incorporated quantum mechanics into this theory, and I'm talking now about my theory, not the actual Kaluza-Klein theory, but the let's say the hidden dimension starts out as the size of a Planck length. Now, as I mentioned, I was funded by DARPA to do this work. And when I was done with it, they were extremely pleased, except for the person who, the manager, chief manager of the project. And he seemed kind of grumpy. And I handed in my final report, and he said, "Thank you, Dr. Brandenburg. Please don't let the door hit you on the way out of the building." Like I said, I believe that I had been hired by DARPA, and they paid me well because they wanted to know what I knew. And so I gave them a full exposition, and I was able to improve the theory and take care of a few rough spots in it and get them all nice and smooth. So DARPA funded this, and one that it worked, even though they didn't want me to pursue that experimental aspect of it. So the basic gem theory works on what's called the Poynting vector, which is the radiation pressure vector of light. So that's the unifying vector field between gravity and electromagnetism, is the Poynting vector. Now, gravity fields are equivalent to arrays of E cross B drifts or Poynting vector. E cross B drift is a phenomenon in plasma physics. It accelerates all charges, and regardless of their charge or mass, it accelerates all of them in the same direction. And so it looks just like, you can actually make something in the laboratory that looks just like gravity and only is made with electromagnetism. Or more exactly, a combination of electromagnetism. I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. Now, the second postulate is gravity and E and M exist as separate fields, along with protons and electrons. This was an idea that Einstein was fascinated with. He called it, he said, the universe, the known particles making up the universe are basically protons and electrons that make up hydrogen. The rest of the universe is only a tiny amount, you know, the more complicated nuclei, oxygen, carbon, things like that. Those are just tiny amounts. The universe started out as pure hydrogen. According to Big Bang theory, there was just nothing. And then 1 second later, the universe was an expanding cloud of plasma made of electrons and protons. That is, a hydrogen plasma. So this theory that I developed tried to explain both of those things, or used both of those ideas. Here is what electromagnetic gravity looks like. If you have two plates and that are charged to different potentials, so there's electric field between them, and then you have magnetic field coming out, you know, parallel to the plate, so it's coming out out of the page. Then if you drop any charged particle in there, proton, electron, zinc nucleus, charged protein molecule, they will all end up moving in the same direction at the same speed. This is called the E cross B drift. You can look it up. It's a plasma physics phenomenon. Look it up on Wikipedia, E cross B drift. And then if you take the two plates and tilt them with one another, all the particles will accelerate. And you can do a very simple simulation. Here's an electron and a proton between these two plates, and there's a magnetic field coming out of the page. And you can see that they're both accelerating in the same direction at the same rate. So you can actually make something in the laboratory that looks like gravity. And another way to look on this is if you have a dark box, and you let's say you're up on the space station, so there's no gravity. Then you put two white hot ball bearings in a dark box. They'll actually repel each other with mutual radiation pressure because they both receive light from each other, and that pushes them apart. So they repel each other. Now, however, if you heat the box so it's white hot and put in two cold ball bearings or balls of carbon or something that's a good absorber, then the two spheres of carbon, let's say, that are cold, feel the radiation pressure around them from the walls, and they attract each other with a 1/r² force. So both of these, the radiation repulsion and the radiation attraction, which is due to the Poynting vector, both follow the 1/r² law of electromagnetism and gravity. So that's a way to make something that looks like gravity using pure electromagnetism. So you can start doing the math on this. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but if you work out the math, you can get formulas for you say, where do these electric and magnetic fields come from that provide you with this E cross B or Poynting effect that creates gravity? Well, they come from quantum mechanics, what's called the 0 point fluctuation. And this was the original idea of Sakharov. Sakharov said that gravity is due to the ZPF, producing a radiation pressure. And you can work out the math of this. And what's interesting is not only does it give a gravity effect, it gives an anti-gravity effect, so that the vacuum, you'll be pleased to hear, in the Sakharov type model of gravity using Poynting vector, the vacuum weighs nothing. How about that? What a great theoretical accomplishment. The vacuum weighs nothing. So that's the first gem postulate, is the gravity fields are made of Poynting vector. Then you have the second postulate, and that is that gravity and electromagnetism started out as the same force, and protons and electrons started out as the same particle back at the first instance of the Big Bang, and then they separated, and they separated in a correlated way. So that the separation of the mass of gravity, of the mass of the proton from the mass of the electron, even though they have the same charge, one plus and one minus charge, and the separation of gravity and electromagnetism from each other to form two separate fields, that proceeded together, and it's related. So the advantage of this, oh, and by the way, the square root of the ratio of the gravity of the proton to the electron mass is 42, just like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I didn't even know about that novel when I first wrote this theory. So I took that as a validation of this theory immediately. So the Kaluza-Klein theory says you have this hidden dimension, and if you have the size of that dimension, as it turns out, it grows from, it starts out at the Planck length and then grows, and it is what runs the separation, it's the same parameter that runs the separation of the mass of the electron from the proton, and also the difference in gravity and electromagnetic forces between like an electron and a proton. So when you do that, you get this 42.85 as being the logarithm of the difference of the strength of gravity and E&M between an electron and a proton is related to the square root of the mass ratio. So as the mass ratio goes from being 1 and this being 0, this becomes like the number 42, and this becomes the number 42 also. So it's kind of tidy. And also you get the mass of the proton in terms of the mass of the Planck mass. But let's not worry about that, because what the most important result from the GEM theory is it is the only theory in existence that gives you the value of the Newton gravitation constant to within a part per thousand. It's just incredibly accurate. And what it says is that the mass of the Newton gravitation constant depends on the electric charge of the electron or proton, their masses. This is called the quantum fine structure constant. So it's quantum mechanics is involved. And then there's this exponential term. So it's very sensitive. But anyway, it gives you the value of the gravitation constant. And let me tell you something. Nobody can do that. I'm sorry. I got Texas bragging rights about this. And this is what my challenge is to the string theory people. Okay, string theory people, have you got big G? And they say no. And I say, well, I got it. And they say, well, that's because your theory is wrong. You cheated somehow. So anyway, actually, you can actually make the theory a little bit better. We won't go into that detail. So now, how do we apply this to like anti-gravity? The forbidden term that the government doesn't ever want us to use. Well, as it turns out, you can get, if you look at the way starlight is bent by gravity, and you look on the photons of light as like particles with no mass, but they're still affected by gravity, as it turns out, you get twice the deflection you would get from a Newtonian theory. So what this finally ends up with is you can get a vacuum Bernoulli equation. I call it the vacuum Bernoulli equation because it's analogous to the equation for static pressure, relating static pressure and dynamic pressure in fluid flows. This is what airplane wings work. So you get the flow over the top of the wing going faster than the flow on the bottom of the wing, and you get lift from that because the static pressure on top of the wing is lower than it is on the bottom because of the difference in fluid velocities. In a similar way, we have a gravitational energy density and an electromagnetic energy density, which is related to the Poynting vector squared divided by some background field strength in the vacuum, a vacuum energy sort of. And we say, okay, now unlike the aerodynamic Bernoulli equation, this equation has a negative sign. So you can still imagine a Bernoulli effect that's actually a negative Bernoulli effect. And you can build craft. You can still build craft. The thing is the wings would be reversed. with the negative sign, so that you would actually get wings that were bulging on the bottom, curved on the bottom rather than on the top. You could still build airplanes. There's just a difference in sign. So the Bernoulli effect is still there with this negative sign, only in this case, we're using the Poynting vector, which is the dynamic over a energy density, electromagnetic energy density, like from the ZPF. And it's sort of the dynamic pressure. And then you have the gravitational energy density, which you can write with as g squared, gravity field intensity over big G, the Newton gravitation constant. You can write that. It has units of energy density. Both of these things have units of energy density, just like they do in the Bernoulli equation. The static energy density, static pressure, and the dynamic pressure have units of energy density. So if you say that this is a constant, then this means you can change gravity by changing the electromagnetism. If you create a big flow of electromagnetism, it will actually strengthen local gravity, believe it or not. Now, this leads itself to experiments where you can see in the laboratory a small effect. And guess what the craft looks like? It looks like a saucer, because you have circulating, the best way to do this is to have a circulating three-phase power invented by Nikola Tesla, and under a conducting shell. And this makes the gravity above the it's the same as making a negative mass layer effectively, so that the shell actually will feel, the conducting shell will actually feel an upward force. And what it says here basically is that the gravity force is slightly weaker up above here than it is here. So that's what comes out of the theory. And according then to using the Tesla rotating fields, a flying craft would look like a dome with 3 coils underneath, or maybe a triangle with a coil at each end of the triangle. And what it does is it creates what we call a Poynting vector vortex, or a Tesla vortex, and creates this lifting force. Now, what this will mean is measurements of this shell will show in a laboratory situation, just demonstrating the physics, you'll see a weakening of gravity. You won't actually see levitation. I don't know how to do that yet. If I did, I'd probably be working at Site 51 and be unhappy. So now we've done experiments where we just took 3-phase coils. Here you can see the 3-phase coils in the 3-phase connections, and I use Gallistan connections, liquid metal instead of mercury, but the effect is the same. So you have this 3-phase power going into this special 3-phase coil. It's a little toy motor, induction motor stator, and you pulse it, you give it the 3-phase power, and this thing will lose like 22 milligrams. Then you shut off the power, it regains its former weight. Gravity gets weaker around this coil. In fact, the coil itself gets lighter. So you can actually do this even more simply with single phase, because it doesn't, three phase is simply the best way to do it, the most efficient way with a Poynting vortex. But you can actually just create a lot of Poynting vector with just single phase. The single phase Poynting vector goes in and out, in and out, in and out as the single phase goes of is AC, and it goes to zero and then reverses. So if you take roughly a 100-watt audio amplifier, run it at roughly a middle A, like 423 hertz, and at about 30 watts, so you're putting out about 11 volts, and you take a toy motor armature that's rated like at 12 volts, and you hook that up and you hang the whole thing underneath just a Mylar balloon in kind of a telephone booth's, kind of a shower stall sized things to keep the air still. Once you turn on the power at 400, like 423 hertz or 400 hertz roughly, 11 volts AC, you'll see that the balloon will instantly start to rise because the coil gets lighter. It feels less gravity. If you turn it off, it immediately sinks. This is not a thermal effect. The coil it doesn't have resistive impedance. It's all so it's not generating heat. Of course it'll get a little bit warmer, but what really makes it work is its inductance. So this is an experiment you could do in your garage. I've done it several times, and I published this, and I'm going to get this published in a scientific journal. But I've been presenting it at conferences, which is this interesting story in itself. So, oh, by the way, people have checked my, the Confluence Institute in Colorado checked the accuracy of my formula for big G. And if you want to look at that link, you can see that they verified, yes, it is highly accurate. So, we have a theory, and the theory predicts that we can weaken gravity in the laboratory to produce a lifting force. I haven't achieved anything like levitation yet. I'm sure the government has already done it. Here's the really fascinating thing that says that we're really making progress. I did these experiments originally about the year 2000. And I was being financed by a company that supposedly was interested in UFOs technology. So I got everything running, and I showed that it would work. The scales experiment and even the balloon experiment. And then came the moment of truth. I found out this was a front organization for one of our intel agencies. And being part of the military-industrial complex, we helped win the Cold War. They said, Dr. Brandenburg, we're impressed with your results. We don't want you to talk about them anymore. So I was disappointed, but I said, okay. So that was year 2000, almost 30 years ago. Last year, in the fall of 2024, I got communication from some of the people I had worked with 30 years ago. And they said, you know, your gravity experiments? And I said, yes. And they said, we want you to publish them now. So I said, yes, sir. And I promptly went on a virtual conference and presented how to do this stuff. And then I went to a American Physical Society conference meeting and presented made a presentation, 15 minutes on how to do this. And I'm preparing an article for publication in a scientific journal. And so I started doing that like they had told me to do. And then in April of this year, so about 4 months after my presentation to the American Physical Society, where I claimed that I could create this gravity modification effect. It's a weak effect, but it's there, easily detectable. And it's fairly straightforward to do, too. So I presented that roughly about the time of November of 2024. And then in April of this year, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, with a director named Michael Kratios, on April 14th, announced that the government could now control space and time. So, I found myself as part of the disclosure process. The government is now disclosing that it has this technology. And I think it would be really great. I'm hoping to come to the Tesla conference and present in detail and even have a working example of this gravity modification technology so that everybody can do it. Believe me, it's not that hard. As you would expect, if it's a fundamental law of nature that you can change gravity fields with electromagnetic fields, that this would actually be, if you did things right, it would actually be pretty straightforward to do. It is. Now, producing a really strong effect so you can achieve flight for a spacecraft, that's, let's say, that's more complicated engineering and requires a much bigger budget, but you can do these experiments for as little as like $200. You can see for yourself that we are now in the age of gravity modification. We can now alter gravitational fields directly using electromagnetic fields. So, and this comes from a theory that I have been developing since about 1986. I first presented the first papers on this at an American Physical Society meeting. So anyway, folks, you guys can do this too. It's not that hard. Now, I don't want anybody doing the, you gotta pay attention to details. I mean, you got to use Gallistan electric metal contacts so that the the bolts don't, the wires don't affect things, wire forces. When you're doing the balloon experiments, you have to use nice fine wire so that the weight of the wire to the coils is a very tiny fraction of the weight of the actual armatures, little motor armatures. You got to get the thinnest wires you can and run about 11 volts AC at 400 hertz down there. And you got to be careful. I don't want anybody making junk and then saying, oh, it doesn't work. We've already seen that. I'm going to publish detailed plans for doing these experiments, and I want people to follow them in detail. And they will see the effects I saw, because it's just physics. Nikola Tesla apparently discovered these effects. And that was part of what the government confiscated when he died. They came in and took everything out of his apartment. And he at the time was talking about doing unified field theory, like Einstein. He was playing one-upsmanship with Einstein. So this can be done by anybody. And it was probably first discovered by Nikola Tesla. The history of it is that Einstein was then talking about unified field theories. The Germans picked up this in World War II. They apparently had something operating, this Glock or Bell experiments, and but they apparently couldn't power it. I mean, it takes to actually lift the weight of something takes a lot of power proportional to the weight of it. So they couldn't develop a portable power source for it. But the U.S. government has apparently solved that problem. So good for the U.S. government. And the U.S. government, like I said, they called me up, said, we want you to publish. So I have been doing so. Now, the rest of this is your guys' problem. You have to figure out, you have to follow directions and do this stuff like I described it, and it will work. So that's really what I'm saying. Now we're going to see our own flying saucers, and the chemical rocket will no longer be what we use to get to Mars. It'll probably be a nuclear-powered flying saucer, like from Forbidden Planet, one of my favorite movies. So that's our future. We're going to have this technology, and imagine like people who have been badly burned in accidents, that they can be levitated over their hospital beds so their skin can heal better. And a lot of good things will happen because of this technology. And you guys who figure out how to levitate stuff with this physical effect will get rich. So, them's my words. I'll be free to answer any questions you have. What do you say, Steve?
I'm back. Well, I believe that they've had this.
There you are.
They've had this technology since about 2000, at least, you know.
Yeah, right.
In the 1990s and that. But I know when I was going to college, early 1990s, and when I was a student at the University of Colorado, and the Air Force used to take us around on these tours and everything. They had out these posters, which was Air Force 2001, and it had the picture of the Aurora and everything. And of course, I handed those out, and it comes back to me about a month later and said, "Hey, what did you do with those posters and everything?" I said, "Well, I gave them mine." I said, "Oh, well, those were classified. We weren't supposed to do that."
Oh my, yeah. Well,
So I have always believed, since about, well, for sure, since they exited from the space program, okay, and they kind of broke away from NASA pretty much, and got rid of the space shuttle. I have believed that they've been getting out in space through other means, and not with the Russians,
yes.
And it's what you call foregone conclusion, based on facts. Anyway, let me bring up one of my colleagues here,
Sure.
Ernie, and he had a couple questions.
Good to hear your presentation and see that DARPA and whatnot's allowing more of this technology to come out.
Yes.
I love it. And I love even more to hear that you will be at the Tesla Tech 2026. And look forward
I hope to have a demonstration set up on a table.
Me too. And I look forward to seeing what you got and what everyone will be showing, and how this anti-gravity technology is so much more than just that, and actual live demos of how real it is.
Well, once space-time geometry, crypto, that was Superman's dog, right? Crypto, crypto alchemist. Okay,
I love that.
I'm sorry, Bernie.
All good, my friend.
Bernie, when we're changing gravity with electromagnetism, which we can do, we are changing space-time geometry. We're bending space-time using electromagnetism directly.
Absolutely. But so I got a question for you in regards to that.
Yes.
If you're not able to create the full warp bubble or like field around yourself traveling through the bent space-time, is there then a time radiation that affects the body if not done right? What are your opinions on that?
I would be very careful. By the time you start trying to levitate things, you're creating, I think, some pretty strong electromagnetic fields that are AC. And we know that can be quite dangerous. So you have to be very careful. The demonstration I intend to show at the Tesla conference is going to be, just low voltage.
Absolutely.
With a weak effect, just enough to show up on we're talking changes of milligrams of, like part per, maybe changes of about 1% on a mass, but you could see that if it's dangled beneath a balloon, you can see it. And, or if it's on a good chemical scale. Now,
it's scalable.
Also, Bernie, is it scalable? Yes.
I'm stating it is scalable, exactly, right? And
yes.
Before I continue, just in reference to my own work, it's like with electrolysis, hydrogen, and stuff like that, I only do 5 volts, where when you step it up, it's scalable and lots more happens, but then you're at risk of a lot more radiation out of it. So you just use the bare minimums when getting into it as demonstration. And then when you put more into it, you conduct it under controlled, safe environments, right? And it's just showing the proof of concept, and that there are risks around it, but you engineer around it when developing it, sort of thing, right?
Exactly, Bernie. You have to be careful about this. Don't just wear a tinfoil hat to keep out the microwaves. You got to wear a whole
lead
tinfoil
suit
suit.
and sometimes, well, a lead suit underneath the
Lead
tinfoil
suit,
suit.
yeah, that.
And sometimes that just isn't enough, and you just have to be physically away, a distance out just away from it, because you don't know what's going to happen and be coming out of it, and that's experimenting safely.
These stories, and these are just reports. We don't know how, especially in detail, how what they are, but they said the Germans did these experiments in World War II, trying to develop their own flying saucer, basically. And obviously, they were not successful because, they didn't win the war, right? And but what happened was they were taking Tesla fields and imposing them on Mercury. And of course, and they're doing this down in tunnels, secret underground facilities, so that everybody, what happens when you stir mercury with Tesla fields, it gets hot and it starts making mercury vapor. So a lot of the technicians
that will kill you. That kills you. And then when it's in the plasma ionized state, there's also possibilities and reports of actual radiation and nuclear reactions that happen. And it's like that stuff's all classified if it was replicated by the government, but they did it. And it's also why lots of ancient alchemists died when doing these sort of things, as they didn't understand that they were radiating themselves. And it also happened to
Bernie. That's good. You're paying very careful attention to the literature and the reports about this. Don't
absolutely
take any unnecessary risks. They said that we're talking experiments done by the Waffen SS during World War II.
Exactly.
Right. What they euphemistically called a high turnover of scientists and engineers working on this project. In other words, a lot of them died or went crazy. And when they were done, when the Russians
go crazy, it's heavy metal poisoning, right? It's like they got.
they were mad as hatters.
Exactly, and it also justifies and vindicates, rest in his soul, Martin Fleischmann and his cold fusion, and that he got radiated and got cancered and died out of it.
Yeah.
And it's a real danger. I myself created radiation when I first started experimenting with this stuff 12 years ago. I got extremely sick, realized what was going on, and then I set thresholds that I never crossed because I know how to do it, but I didn't want to kill myself, right?
Good, Bernie. You look healthy. That's good. And I knew two guys who were doing rotating Tesla fields at microwave frequencies, and shortly after I saw their rotating plasmas that they were making, they both ended up in the hospital. I was fortunately I just saw one experiment in the lab. It was very impressive. And I said, I'd been sent there by my superiors at Lawrence Livermore National Lab to look at what they were doing. And I said it looked very interesting. Then I reported back after seeing, one experiment. And then I found out later they both ended up in the hospital. One of them died within a few months because they were irradiating themselves with something.
Right.
So you got to be really careful.
My next experiments are combining exactly those things, but that I'm going to be doing them out in the country, out in farmers' fields, and it's like in the grass, away from everything, and that we'll be able to record and see if all the grass dies around it and stuff and what happens, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. and the only life that will be affected is the grass and vegetation, and able to measure it essentially in that way of if how harmful it is, what the effects are, and not risking ourselves
Sure.
when combining those forces. And that I've held off doing this for 10 years until it's like in the right controlled environment. And yeah, that's what we'll be doing here in the springtime.
I would also advise don't use any mercury. Use Gallinstan.
No, right? So I'm gonna start with like silver, copper, gold, tungsten, and maybe
Yeah,
bismuth.
use
And
inert metals
yeah,
that
yeah.
don't drive people crazy. The other
And
terrible story I heard was that the guy in charge of the SS, who they regard this as their highest priority secret project during World War II, even more higher priority than like the V2 or the V1. And when the German, the Nazi Reich was collapsing, he had all of his engineers and scientists write him a big report and hand it into him. Then he had them all taken out by the SS and massacred. And he then traded the report for some plane tickets for himself and his family to
for his
Argentina.
inclusion to Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, yes, it got paper clipped. So that's where this government apparently got a hold of this technology. And the Russians, not the Russians, the Russians apparently found out about it and did their own experiments and were able to catch up. But what the secret apparently is that you have to have a very high power, a very low mass but very high power source of electrical energy, like rotating Tesla fields, polyphase. You have to have like a turbo alternator, run by gas turbine.
Is that essentially what the Philadelphia experiment was doing, but more stepped up? So along those lines, or is that different?
Yeah, I tend to think the Philadelphia experiment was, I think that was different than this. I think the Philadelphia experiment was one of these accidental discoveries, which unfortunately cost the lives of several sailors
And when they
because
fused together,
they
right?
did not expect. They didn't. Tesla just wanted to mount a bunch of Tesla coils basically on a ship to create a plasma sheath around it so it would couldn't be detected on radar, which works. And
Right, but
but
a full plasma
Tesla,
right, when you get a full plasma like bubble created in field, that's then it's transcending time space essentially at that point, and then it's like then that's how it had those effects, and then how they fused together coming through or something, right?
yeah, I don't know. I decided to avoid doing any such experiments because I didn't want to end up embedded in the wall. There's
Right, exactly.
a science
But
fiction movie.
it's evidence that when you're deconstructing matter slash going through space, it's also time, right? So that it's like
Right.
they're fabric together, so that this when you get through that barrier, you're literally dealing with actual time as in relation proportion to the space that you're going through, and there's all sorts of different effects that weren't expected, and more it's real basically, right? And there's a lot to it.
Well, what it's interesting you should mention real. The theory I've tried to do, well, let's put it this way. If you use this effect, you can make the effective mass of something go to become very tiny and even push it below zero, so it's negative. But imagine that you can put a twist on space-time and make it imaginary. And then you have warp drive. Then you have, if you bending space-time, that gives you anti-gravity. Being able to turn space-time into a pretzel, you know, so you have full control, that gives you warp drive.
I comprehend what you're saying, and I get it. And it's the future is looking promising, and that
Yes, it is.
It's time space, and that there's potentially been these different discoveries at different points throughout humans' history, so that, you know,
Yes.
who knows where in time they went, and who knows where in time we're gonna go as we go forward.
Who knows? Who
Well,
knows?
I like to remind everyone.
Everything's on the table now for us.
I like to remind
What's
everyone
that?
there that I like to remind everybody that anytime you have an open spark, you have extreme ultraviolet coming out of that thing, you know, stream rays, and that's what's going
Absolutely.
to. And it's be a Tesla coil, a small tabletop model even. But like I say, anytime you have an open spark, it's just throwing off things. And look at our big coil builders like Bill Weishaupt, you know, Robert Golka. They're no longer with us, you know. And I myself am sensitive. Like when I can run those things, I can feel them. And I can
Big time, right? Absolutely. And when you get a certain EM field, you start, there's time dilation in small levels in a certain relation to that area that lots of individuals have experienced doing these experiments recently.
Yeah.
I tell you a funny story. We had a project from the Air Force to make ball lightning for them, and we finally made it as big as soccer balls. One of the things we were told was, you can't call it ball lightning. Don't ever call it ball lightning if you want to keep getting funding from us. So we called it Pia, after Pia Zadora, who is the Italian starlet back in the 70s. Steve will remember her. So anyway, persistent ionization in air. But anyway, we were finally so successful, we were making this stuff as big as soccer balls. And we'd done our experiments in a microwave oven, and then we built a bigger one to do industrial microwaves at 915 megahertz. And that was successful. So then we came home we were up in Maine, where they had a big 915 megahertz microwave source that we could use for these experiments. And it was all funded by the Air Force and everything. So we came home, and my my chief technician and safety guy, he was electrical and mechanical genius. He had built most of the experiment. He came home, and he walked in the door in Maryland and said, "Hi, honey," he said to his wife, "I'm home." And she says, "Where the hell have you been?" And he said, "I've been in New Hampshire with Brandenburg, and the other guys. We were running the ball lightning experiments." And she says, "Why have you got a sunburn then?" Right? And he realized he had this classic, mirror by the doorway entrance. So he looked in the mirror, and his forehead was bright red, so were his cheeks. And so he immediately gets on the phone to me, and I had just walked into my apartment in Virginia, about 200 miles to the south. And I said, "Yeah, Vince, what is it?" And he says, "John, look at your face." So I went and looked at my face, and thank God we'd been wearing goggles. We were wearing
damaged your eyes.
We could have got cataracts immediately, but we had gotten a big dose of UV. So
it was like you were out on a glacier in full sunlight for 2 days straight, sort of thing, right? Like, just straight burnt.
In all of my reports on this stuff, I said, if you after a thunderstorm, you see what looks like ball lightning in your backyard, stay the hell away from it. You know, it's probably charged to 1,000,000 volts for one thing, but it's putting out a lot of UV, probably even X-rays. And
Right? It's essentially a mini
this stuff
sun,
is,
right?
you got to treat this stuff with respect. What's that?
It's essentially like a mini sun sort of thing in that sustained form
Yeah.
as it's active. So I'll
Yes,
give
it
you a
is.
little story of my dad and his actual experience with ball lightning when he was 6 years old, and that
Ah,
lightning struck the rail lines about I guess like about a half mile, or no, probably a quarter kilometer, so I guess like a 20th of a mile from his house, and a bunch of them formed, but one of them, it went across the ditch, across the highway, down my grandparents' driveway, and it went through the screen door, and then right as it got like in vision of my dad and a few feet away, it just went poof and went into nothing, and he said all he could smell was ozone everywhere. And it's like it went
that's
like
right.
it just wild things of like how they act, what they can do, the anomalies, and that like it's just dissipated into nothing, didn't harm them as soon as it got close, turned into ozone, but like it got all the way from the rail line. It's anomalous stuff, and I could only
I've heard
imagine
many
making
stories,
it.
many stories like that. And, you know, the story I heard was that it came right through a pane of glass in the big living room window, right through the glass. Came into the room, went to a steam radiator, and then went bang like a firecracker. And
Right? Like,
this
and it
this
can do
impressed this guy
either
so
or.
much. This was he was like 11 years old, and he decided to become a plasma physicist when he got older. So he ended up working with me at Lawrence Livermore. So it
That's
was
amazing.
it's interesting stuff. But
Well,
yeah, you got to respect it. You got to respect it. Gotta.
Exactly. And like, it's how is this
It's
thing
not
that is
nice to
like as
fool with
hot as
Mother
the
Nature.
sun, right? It's natural. And how is something that's as hot as the sun being able to like go through metal, go through glass, and like not affected at all, and then either it decides to like react and go up or turn into nothing, and like it's a mystery of the universe
It
that
is.
truly
It is
respects.
a mystery. I'm not embarrassed at all to say I don't know. I don't know why it can do that. It doesn't. It doesn't compute.
well, with that, I'm gonna kind of bring this to a close tonight.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay, Steve.
Good
Well, thank you so
conversation.
much, and Bernie. Thanks so much for getting involved in this discussion. You brought some
100%.
really interesting
We'll
stuff
have
to
to
the
do a
table.
follow-up interview. I'll get in contact with you, John, and talk some more
Okay.
and show stuff. Everyone
Okay.
needs to
Yeah.
come to Tech 2026 to see his presentations and my presentations and all the rest. It's the best.
Okay, and then
Well,
I want to
I
remind
hope.
everyone.
What
Go
I
ahead, John.
hope is by the time of next year at the presentations at the new Tesla Tech thing, that other people will show up with their own demonstrations of this effect. Maybe even better than mine. How about that?
Well, with that, we're going to call it a close. I'll remind everyone, if you're not a member, or subscribe to our Tesla channel. And we have videos, I believe, of both of you up online there. So become a subscriber, and hopefully you'll become an exclusive member of $9.99 a month, and it really helps us out and helps us move things forward. And thank you again. And I don't know when we'll do next Sunday yet. Like I say, we may be in the middle of a move, and I might not have the facility to do the show, but we'll work that out later on. So y'all have a great night, and I'll see y'all next week. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Pleasure and an honor.